Hey guys, Steven here, Fanatic Perspective. It's been a while since we've had the Hoops crew on here, but with this off season, everything that's gone on, I think it's an appropriate time for us to get together and just have an open forum to talk some ball, some Texas basketball. Been, like I said, crazy off season for Rodney Terry as he kind of steps into this role of trying to build this program, trying to capitalize on the unbelievable season we had last year and create some year-over-year momentum. And so we're going to talk about the new additions, the subtractions, just a whole Texas basketball forum. And you know, I got my boys on here as usual, Austin, Ryan, Colin, and fellas, you know, I want y'all to be just candid and honest, right? Which you guys always are. But again, this is an open forum just to share our thoughts of how we believe this roster gels together. And from a roster management standpoint, and this is also for those who are watching out there that have not been keeping up with every single move or detail, hopefully educational for you on how this roster will look for the 2023-2024 season. And if we're done, or if there's still some moves to be made, make sure you hit that subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button. We appreciate all the support for the channel. This is something that I want to make, as a regular basis as we do cover more basketball. And we also want to give a real quick shout out to the Texas baseball team. They just got their first regional W over Louisiana. And I believe they're in the winner's bracket to face Miami. And shout out to a friend of the channel, Dylan Campbell, for a 36-game hitting streak. I don't care what level of baseball you're at, that display of consistency, discipline at the plate, remarkable accomplishment. I believe, Austin, is it right to say that was a Big 12 record?
Yeah,
Or conference record.
Yep.
Yeah. So 36-game hit streak is just unbelievable. Wow. But from a basketball standpoint, and I want to open it up to the crew here as we look at what we lost. And we knew we were going to lose a lot after last year. That was expected. But the journey we've taken to get to this roster, when you look at some of the additions, and Ryan, I'll start with you. Abe Smith from Oral Roberts and Cedric from Virginia, and I'm up here in Arlington, so UTA, we had Chendall Weaver come in, and Yema coming in from UTEP. I mean, how are you seeing all this play out, especially with the guys that are also returning to this crew? Just your immediate thoughts as you look at this roster.
Yeah, I think first thoughts, I put it in three different categories. One was pretty sobering to see, the team that we had last year and the amount of guys that we had leave, and it was expected, right? You had Timmy, Jabari, Marcus, all who had been here for a few years, at least Marcus and Timmy. The roster turnover, who was going to stay, who was going to go to the draft. I was pretty surprised that Tyrese and Dylan decided to go through the combine. Of course, thankfully they're both back. They're going to play a huge role this year. And again, just the turnover of the roster was the first thing that stood out to me, and I was a little worried, and I know we're going to get to that in a little bit of our moment that had us shaking a little bit on the team going forward. But in terms of the additions that we had, I think Max by far is going to be the most high caliber one. He's the NCAA all-time point leader right now, 2,600 points or so. Of course, we remember him, I think, was that 3 years ago or maybe even 4 years ago when him and O'Banner were playing together at Oral Roberts and had that crazy tournament run. So you know what he's going to bring to the table. I do think that he's going to complement Dylan really well if we use him wisely in terms of that same type of 1-2 punch. And then you're just adding depth, I think, at the big position. Dylan coming back was big. Having Shedrick there to play with him is going to be important. And I think one thing we talked about before we got on here is what type of lineup would we see? Would we move Dylan to the 3, which is going to have him play a certain type of way and hopefully bring out some more positive characteristics that we're going to need in him to be successful? Or will we go more smaller and maybe start Chindel or someone else along those lines? I know there's still some potentials out there that we could pick up, but initial reaction is it started off really slow and was looking really grim there for a while, to say the least, with having, I think, 2 or 3 players on the roster, and 2 of those guys were, quote unquote walk-ons or guys that didn't really get a lot of minutes last year. So it's slowly built out, and I'm feeling a lot better now than I did about a month ago.
Austin, jump in.
Yeah, I think, looking just first and foremost, looking at just the averages of what the team lost, nearly 50 points in departures. And in college basketball, we know that that's a lot of points. So, we'll get into the stuff like Ryan said later, but, with just guys leaving it was kind of panic mode for a little bit. I think there has been a little bit of easing the tides, if you will, lately. But yeah, I mean, like you said at the beginning, you knew you were going to lose a lot. That's why that team was built for a deep March run, which they made. Some Texas fans will say they left a little bit of meat on the bone, but for the most part, looking back, it was a great year. However, the part that I don't know about rattled me, but just I don't know if there's kind of one moment, not just crazy shake your head moment, but just something that's not familiar with all of us is Texas has no prep signees at all, period. And that's just something that I don't think we have seen. Maybe I could be wrong, but I don't think we've ever seen that in our lifetime where not a single high school kid is coming into the program. So a little different there. But yeah, I really just kind of want to echo Ryan's sentiments. I feel a lot better now, knowing that we have a good core group that has been, with this coaching staff. You got a Brock Cunningham, Tyrese, Dylan, guys that have been around, and really all three of those guys, show a tremendous amount of effort when they're on the court, and I believe off the court as well, just to kind of gel those guys in. But there were a few departures that did surprise me. We'll get into that later, but I guess pulse of the program, I feel okay. Again, we'll get into a lot more meat and potatoes of that later, but I feel okay. I feel a lot better, today in early June than I did about a month ago. So.
Where's your head at, man, as you look at this roster as it stands right now?
Yeah, I think if you, to Austin's point, go back a month, 2 months ago, I'm in an F- mode. But if you kind of look at where we are constructed today with kind of the additions of Adams and Shedrick and Weaver and Onyema, I feel probably in a B-ish minus mode. So I don't think we did as well as we probably could in terms of kind of rebuilding the foundation, because ultimately, we lost the foundation of the program. And in today's day and age in college basketball, there are still really two ways to build the program. One way is go get high school kids, kind of develop them. I would say mostly that's going to be a few Power 5 programs and the programs outside of that. The other way is going to just be using that transfer portal and going and getting guys who maybe they needed a year of development somewhere else, show that they could play kind of on a D1 level stage, or guys who, like in Adams, have been, pretty high level Division I players for a significant amount of their careers and are kind of looking for new opportunities. And so with the transfer portal, that's really opened up the ability to rebuild that foundation. And that's what you really saw kind of Beard come in and do early on with, Timmy, Serge Ibaka last year, obviously Marcus Carr, Dylan coming over from Vanderbilt, and Christian Bishop coming over from Creighton. And so I think that's really what Rodney understood coming in with Chris. And then obviously I think that's what he's going to try to continue to do as he tries to rebuild kind of the foundation of the program this coming year.
One thing I think, in going back to a point that was mentioned earlier about the lack of prep guys, and because I want to kind of take it into the kind of the WTF moment that each of us had this off season. And I will say this, for me, I'll start. Ryan mentioned Tyrese Hunter and Dylan Mitchell entering the NBA draft, obviously not signing and going through the process. And that is well within their right to do, and get the feedback that they needed. In the case of Tyrese Hunter, he did not make it to the NBA Combine. Let's just be explicitly clear about that. I had the, I was like, bro, do you want to go play in Istanbul next year? Like, what are you trying to do? Or are we serious? Right. And I'm blunt about that. And I'm thankful he's back. And I hope that he can improve and continue to show that development and growth as a player and what he's capable of, especially the way he started last season. But I will say that them leaving and the way the roster looked at the time, in my opinion, that impacted how we could build. I believe that impacted when somebody like Ron Holland is sitting there and AJ Johnson. The AJ Johnson thing is one thing, okay? From everything we've learned about that situation and what he was looking at and where his game was, quite frankly, that a lot of folks just weren't keeping up with out in California, that's one thing. but Ron Holland finished in some services the number 1 player in the country. No lower than 2, right? 2, 3, that's the range we're talking about. And there was a time where I'm like, yo, if Tyrese Hunter and Dylan Mitchell had come back early and shown that commitment to the coaching staff and to the program, and I know it's in there, right, but I just felt like it was it wasn't realistic for what they were trying to, for either of them. I'm gonna get into Dylan Mitchell later, but for my WTF moment, I believe that really hurt us a little bit in terms of maybe maintaining or adding a guy like a Ron Holland to this. I think they had to go to plan B, and in some cases plan C. And yes, they've had success and they've been able to put this thing back together. But that was something that really disappointed me. Ryan, what was one of your moments?
Yeah, I think mine's on the same vein as that. I think 2 things, and I already hit on one earlier, which was when the roster was at 2 to 3 guys. That was a moment, a very sobering WTF moment. But I think the bigger one was a main point why RT was brought back was because it's like, hey, we'll run it back with the guys that we know are coming back. And that includes AJ Johnson and Ron Holland. Like they're bought in, they're tweeting about it. They're full support of RT. It's like, okay, great. And then 2 weeks later, boom, everyone vanishes and disappears off the face of the earth. So it's like, what happened behind the scenes. And a lot of it, we talked about this, was when, I think RT went on air and said, don't get it twisted. Like, I know how to recruit. And then bam, they left right after that, or at least decommitted and looked at their options. But like you said, I think this is just the age that we live in with, and it's good, I think, for college players and high school players to have the ability to look at G League, look at overseas, look at transferring. You look at like Zach Edey being able to come back because he's probably going to get paid way more as a college player than he will in the NBA. So those different types of things give these players flexibility. So I think for a coaching staff, you have to be able to really double down on being able to keep the guys that you've built in terms of the trust and the want to play here. So I think that was my WTF moment, was just the roster at a glance from the beginning was looking pretty promising. And then we were going to add a few pieces. And we ended up having to start from sandbox mode, basically, and try to build up off of it.
We pause right there, though, because I want to, this is a broader conversation I think we need to have. Number one, do we believe that Texas's NIL package for basketball is where it needs to be? I believe we've seen challenges with other schools, Michigan being one that comes directly to mind, right? Where they're just not able to get it together in sync, whether it's with their academics, whether it's the overall package that they're offering their players. Because when you see guys like a Hunter Dickinson leave, or you see a Caleb Love decommit, these are big ass names. These aren't just like, these are people that have gone and played in national championship games, played in Final Fours, right? And so with the whole Texas thing, when I'm seeing guys, yes, evaluating their options, my whole thing is what's realistic versus what is more negotiations, and are we where we need to be? And Rodney Terry's thinking he's feeling good, but then the money's not lining up. And like we said, the G League is in play, and that is a realistic option for guys. I mean, Shaka a few years ago, yes, he defeated the G League to get Greg Brown. It was Greg Brown versus the G, and we were able to keep Greg Brown. But now that's a lot of people are losing talent to the G League. That's a realistic thing. So I don't know whoever wants to jump in. I think that's something that what Ryan brought up. I think we need to elaborate on that a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, when you take a look at financially how schools approach NIL generally, I would say most of the attention has gone to football, right? Everybody knows that, football is the program that brings in the money that supports really the rest of the sports at most universities. And I don't have the exact statistics. Maybe there are a few basketball, in terms of men's basketball programs, again, that actually generate revenue rather than being a cost center for a university. But I think as you look at the NIL kind of landscape and how it's developed over the last few years, most folks have really focused on football. And you take a look at, what Texas has done for the offensive line. There's been way more talk for, a group of very large human beings for one position on a football team relative to any other sport. So I think a lot of schools have focused the first few years on making sure they can get football right, and then really trying to work through kind of, getting to basketball. Baseball has been a very typically underfunded program, specifically for coaching, but how do you get that right? And then obviously the trickle down through, the rest of both men's and women's sports. So I think it's going to be something that continues to evolve. It's something that's not really well known. Again, this has only been around, a few years now. So they have to continue to work on how do we expand this outside of the sport that is actually generating revenue for the university. And obviously that's with donors, that's with the university, it's with sponsors as well.
Austin, Ryan, did you want to add anything to that or
Yeah, real quick, like 30 seconds. I mean, you could look at the 247 rankings. Nearly every top 50 player on those rankings, you could make an argument, hey, that guy belongs in the G League. So now I don't think we're looking at necessarily Greg Brown versus the G League. It's almost like, okay, if you're a 5-star, that's your option. People are kind of making the eye emojis like, is he G League bound? No matter where they're committed. And that's just, it really sucks for the coaching staff and the other players, because it's like, yeah, you can get a guy like Ron Holland who, like Ryan said, it's like, oh, he's ours. He's guaranteed to start, all 38 games or however many we play. And then poof, just like that, G League Ignite, see ya. We'll never hear of you again in Austin, and it's almost, I mean, you hear like recruiting through the whistle. It's like, what, this Ron Holland thing happened, a week ago, 2 weeks ago. So, yeah, it's just hard, man. And to your point about the changing landscape of college basketball, it's almost like football where we don't know truly what our roster will be until game one, almost, like legitimately until mid-November. Hey, who's the starting five going to be? I don't know, because so-and-so still might not show up to summer workouts or whatever. So I don't know. It's not just a Texas problem. I'll tell you that. As much as we want to say, oh, well, this is only us, I promise it's not. I do think Texas NIL has all the capabilities to be a top tier NIL program. And I can't speak as to, who we've gotten already via NIL. I don't know that, but I would like to think that it plays a big part, obviously, instead of just saying, oh, this was 100% Chris Beard, this guy didn't take a dime. I think that's just naive to say, but yeah, I don't know. I think we're in an okay spot, but I totally agree with everything Colin and Ryan said.
Austin, jump into your WTF moment. What was yours?
Yeah, I'm not going to be basic and say, Holland and Johnson leaving. I'm going to go a little deeper. Mine was Arterio Morris leaving, and not just leaving, but going to Kansas. We've gone down this road with Jalen Tyson going to Texas Tech, and you see it at Oklahoma State with Rondell Walker going to TCU, and now Avery Anderson going to TCU, and you have all these schools in the country, and I get it. Kansas is different from 99% of those schools, but you go to the one school where you're just like, man, that is who we are directly competing with. And knowing our luck as Longhorn fans, Arterio Morris is going to average a double-double next year and probably be first team all Big 12. So that's upsetting. He played in all 38 games last year, despite only averaging about 12 minutes a game. But that was a guy where you were like, man, if we can just get him to his sophomore year, have a full off season, just the game will slow down with him, especially having Tyrese and a guy like Max by his side. I really felt like that would only benefit him. So to hear that news waking up that morning and seeing that he was decked out in the Kansas alternate red, I was like, golly, you got to be kidding me. But yeah, a little bit bummed about that. I don't know if that's more WTF or just sad. I think that was my depressing moment of the offseason. I was really looking forward to him being a Longhorn great, following the likes of, a TJ Ford or a DJ Augustine. He just kind of fit that mold for me. So that was upsetting, I will say.
Yeah, the whole Terrio experience just it didn't hit the
roller
way
coaster.
we thought it was going to hit. It was all the way through. Colin, I'll get to your WTF moment.
Yeah, I think there was a few. One, and we joked about this, was going to sleep and waking up with my back thrown out. That was a WTF moment for the off season of this group. So we just need to make sure that that's in there. But when you kind of look at the landscape of college basketball, prior to the transfer portal, prior to NIL, there really wasn't any, like, you'd go to sleep, to Austin's point, and wake up and be like, oh my God, why is one of our players sitting there in the Kansas alternate jerseys, right? But when you take a look at something like, a Caleb Love going from UNC to Michigan to Arizona in one off season, it's so free agent-esque now. So I thought that was interesting. I thought, obviously, you kind of touched on a little bit with Hunter Dickinson and just everything that, like, Kansas is. And I know they had a very disappointing, tournament run last year, losing to Arkansas. But when you take a look at, like, what Bill Self is able to do, and there's some tweet the other day that has all of his statistics listed out. It's like every year you kind of take a look at them and then everybody else. And it was really a bummer last year that we couldn't, get to that one spot in the Big 12. And I actually will be glad not to have to play Kansas every year, to be blatantly honest. But when you look at their kind of rebuilt roster, bringing back DeJuan Harris, Kevin McCullough, obviously KJ Adams, and then adding Hunter Dickinson, adding Arteria Morris, adding Nick Timberlake, who was, an all-conference player at Towson as well. I just think they're going to have a really, really kind of spectacular team and roster going in next year. And that coaching staff is going to continue to develop those players as well. And then, I think the other big one was Zach Edey coming back to school. I'm a big Zach Edey fan. I think he's a fantastic college player. I don't know if he's going to be a great NBA player. I know Ryan disagrees with that. We talked about that at length, but him coming back to school as the National Player of the Year. When's the last time a National Player of the Year has come back to school without kind of the restriction around, oh, hey, you can't go to the NBA draft next year? I don't remember. So obviously someone like that coming back to school, getting paid, I think it's just good for folks who really like and enjoy the game of college basketball. So I'm going to enjoy seeing him back next year and him continue to dominate the Big Ten and hopefully not losing to another 16 seed. So we'll see.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's the names in college basketball are still around. While they may be shifting, the ability to stay, the ability to be able to get paid and all of those factors. Having a Zach Edey that, like you said, National Player of the Year. I mean, we saw that the year before. It wasn't National Player of the Year, but a big guy like, Armando Bacot coming back to North Carolina. And, I think he's back again, right? Like it's so you have those aspects of college basketball that we didn't necessarily have before pre-NIL. I want to start talking about this roster, right? And how these pieces fit together. So Ryan, you made the point earlier. So if we start to look at the lineup, right? As of right now, I believe we would say our backcourt would be Tyrese Hunter, Max Abmas. Then we get into the front court. And I'm just talking about the starting lineup because I want to get into rotations to where I feel we're solid or where we have some holes. But the front court, Dylan Mitchell, Dylan DeSutte. So the two Dylans, and then obviously Cedric from Virginia, 6'11", big man, much needed size. We haven't had a big, God bless Christian Bishop and the crew at 6'7", 6'8", holding it down there, but to get some real length up front is awesome. Ryan, you made the point that that's a big lineup. My whole thing is this. Dylan Mitchell, you're coming back. I need to see the development for me defensively to justify the development and the growth. I know everybody was looking at the videos of him shooting threes at the combine and all these things. Anything I get from you offensively outside of being active around the rim to me is a plus. I don't think it's realistic where he is right now to just assume that he's going to make this gigantic leap. Now, if he does, awesome. But I think we need to reframe our expectations even of him as an offensive player versus what our expectations are of what I need him to do defensively in order to stay on the floor and also be an asset for us. Because I do think that with his athleticism and hopefully his basketball IQ coming along, and that's where the coaches help with development, he can be somebody that's a defensive stopper. He can be somebody that's a guy that's out there getting a block and a couple steals a game and just did, we talk about the stat that's becoming more and more popular in college basketball, actually NBA and college, is deflections. Do we have active hands? Are we active against zone? That's something that I thought Texas did a fantastic job of during the tournament as a whole group, right? And so can Dillon Mitchell be a cog where we feel comfortable playing him at the 3 defensively? We feel comfortable flexing down where he can play some minutes, as a small ball big. And I'm, again, just being able to rebound, being able to do some of those dirty work things, screen, rescreen, roll to the cup, and finish. I can't have another 4.3 rebound year and that jump up to 7 points, 5 rebounds. He's got to be better than that, fellas. To me, that determines how much we maximize. That's a piece I'm looking at personally with this roster. Where else do you guys want to go, Ryan? If you want to jump in.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. How he's going to be able to play is going to affect what we can do. I mean, we saw last year there were spurts where he would get switched on to guards and he would be able to effectively play defense, but it was very up and down. Me and Colin, watched most of the Big 12 games together and the tournament games, and it was just all over the place with how he looked, especially in the first half. If we can just get him to play in the second half too, that was another challenge. Is Rodney didn't put him on the floor in the second half, and that was very puzzling for someone who's as talented and athletic. I think on the offensive side, the good thing for him is Admis and Hunter are both volume type guys. So again, we're going to be very guard heavy, I feel like, with where our scoring comes from, similar to how Marcus was last year. That's going to help, but I do think this is on RT and the coaching staff to get him more involved on offense, one way or the other, right? Pick and rolls, if the team's playing zone, get him at the high post where we can give him the ball and let him play off of that. I do think that there was a lot of standing around and him running to the corner, 40 to 50% of the offensive possessions, and then just letting things happen. And occasionally he'd run in and catch a tip dunk, right? He needs to be touching the ball in possessions. And I think, again, the Admis and his combination could be interesting, similar to how him and O'Banner played, if Mitchell can at least develop it looked like a good 3-point shot, or at least one.
So you're saying if the coaches make a concerted effort to have him more engaged, then the player will probably be more apt to do more and be, if he knows in the game plan. Yeah. He
seemed very hesitant in a lot of areas. Didn't want to take 1 or 2 dribbles. It was very one dribble, let me toss the ball back and get out of the way. And that could have been just him being a freshman and us having 4 60-year seniors playing on the team. There's a dynamic there to be talked about. But if you look at the rest of the starting lineup, I think that's going to be our best lineup. If you look at it, you don't want to have to sit Dessou or Shedrick, right? Like, both of those guys are going to play, and Admis and Hunter are starting. So it's really that other guard position. Now, what could be interesting, and I know we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but Kaluma from Creighton, he's still deciding what's going to happen. I think he's a plug and play guy too, or he could be a 6th man, similar to what SJR did last year for us. And of course, you have Brock coming off the bench, who's going to be, what you're going to get from him: 5 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, most likely in 10 minutes of play. And then I really don't have any pulse right now on Weaver and Onyema, like what they're going to be able to do. We won't really know till the season starts, but overall, I think that's what you're looking at from a starting lineup in best case. And those guys really making it work. The depth worries me still if we don't add another player or two, but that's my initial thoughts, at least on starting lineups and depth.
Austin, jump in.
Yeah, like I said earlier, if you look at the departures, we lost about 50 points. But if you look at the incoming guys, and I know Admis makes up a good chunk of it, but we averaged like 46 coming in, which, like, you would take that. Now, the caveat there is, did all of those guys play high level P5 basketball? No, they didn't. And just like the guys we had coming in, I'm pretty sure, Jabari Rice and Marcus Carr coming in, we were like, oh my gosh, these guys are crazy volume shooters. And obviously Marcus Carr went ballistic way before he even got to Texas, and he was a great Longhorn. I'm not taking anything away, but some of those guys did, just at their average coming in, and some of those guys fell well below. Just one, because there's only so many shots that a team can take in a basketball game. So that I just found that stat just kind of as we were talking here. So that makes me feel a little bit better. I think Ryan hit the nail on the head about the best case scenario. Admis is starting, Hunter's starting. If you can just get a little bit out of Mitchell, I feel really good about Dessou having another year coming back. But Depth wise, again, like Ryan said, I just don't know what we're going to get out of Weaver and Onyema and Shedrick and those guys. I want to believe the best and say, oh, these guys are going to get acclimated super early. Everybody's going to know their role, and this team's not going to miss a beat. But it's so hard to say when they haven't even had a full practice together, as a full group yet. So, yeah, as far as lineups go, I really like what Ryan said about Brock. That's just your junkyard dog, and he's going to keep the group together, be the glue guy, get his 5 steals, or whatever he gets, deflections, all the 50-50 balls, the whole 9 yards. You don't need him to step up into a role that he's not prepared to do, which would be, take 7 to 10 threes a game. It's just not going to happen. I hope he keeps knocking them down. He was almost 50% last year from 3, which was super underrated. I think it was a pleasant surprise, though, that when I saw Brock take a wide open 3, I wasn't cringing. I was like, oh, I think this is going in. So that would be a really, really, awesome addition to have to keep that shooting percentage up and keep that going strong. But it's not something that I think a lot of Longhorn fans are talking about. But to wrap up my point, I just hope the incoming guys, including Abe Smith, because playing in the Summit League is not playing in the Big 12, Pac-12, SEC, all that. It's just not. So I hope he adjusts, and I hope he, takes his game to that next level and is that 25-point-a-night guy, just like he has been his whole career. I mean, guys, he has 2,500 points since he's been a college basketball player. That's a ton. So I feel really, really good about the backcourt. Front court is probably my question mark spot. So anyway, that's kind of my quick wrap.
With the Ames thing, I really agree where you're coming from in terms of step up in competition, especially nightly in conference. That's a big deal. And averaging 22 points, 23 points, 24 points, what he's done over the last 3 years is remarkable. Is it realistic to ask him to average 20 plus points per game at Texas? I don't even know who's the last person that averaged 20 points, right? Or more. Like, that's a big number in college basketball, especially in the P5 area. And so
Kevin Durant, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, if you really think about it, like, it might be KD who was the last person to average over 20. So that's a big number, but we're also saying, can he kind of overcome some of those things that he struggled with? That Duke game is still in my mind with him in terms of the length, and all of a sudden that shot making ability goes away. Like, Colin shared some of the numbers with us, but if you look at his shooting splits, field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, for somebody that's a volume shooter shooting 38, 39%, that's a good number for a volume 3-point shooter that's not just taking shots off the catch, but also creating off the dribble and taking deep step back threes. That's a good percentage, and is 85, 86, 87% from the free throw line. However, are those numbers going to stay there in the Big 12, or all of a sudden the lights get brighter? And that's something we obviously have questions about Weaver. I like Weaver's athletic profile. I like the corner 3 percentage that he comes in with, but is he going to make those shots at Moody? And so those are some things I got to see it to believe it with this group. And maybe we haven't talked enough about Dylan Dessou. I feel like the way he ended the season, the guy was a freaking monster and one of the best offensive big men in college basketball. We've just kind of sidestepped it. I don't know. Colin, I'll let you jump in though with the whole breakdown of all this. But those are just some thoughts I had coming off of Austin's piece.
Yeah, I think you guys have made some really good points when you kind of take a look at where we'll be next year. And it's, I can't remember who made the point. I think Austin made a point of you won't actually know anything until mid-November. So I think the way that I look at it is like a few really high level questions that I have over the summer, over the fall, to where we get to kind of November, right? And one of those things is obviously, how do all these pieces gel together? It comes with the new age of college basketball. Are these people going to like each other? You take a look at, last year's team, and a big part of that was they can all come together over, a kind of common goal. They were all very mature in terms of how they went about their business. Sans maybe you take a look at, the freshmen, but you can't really expect an 18, 19-year-old to be as mature as a Serge Ibaka Rice or Marcus Carr, who was, a dad Serge Rice had played 5 years of college basketball. Like, those are just different kind of things. And so it's,
Great points.
can a Max Admis and Shedrick be, a leader, a senior figure, somebody who, folks can genuinely look up to on and off the court? I think that's a huge question. Number two is health. This is a question everyone has across any sport, but, if Max gets hurt, or if Tyrese, who we all know deals with cramps every single game, is hurt in the second half, we're sitting there like, okay, well then who's playing that second guard position down the stretch of the game? I think that's a real big concern that I have. Third question is, how do we take a look at this offense? Is it going to be ran through Max? Is it going to be ran through Dylan? If you take a look at the end of last year, all that offense was going to be ran through Dylan, despite, at the beginning of the year, it was all Marcus, it was all Tyrese, it was all Serge Ibaka. But as he kind of developed through the Big 12 tournament and the NCAA tournament, that was the offense, was getting him the ball and letting him kind of go to work. So how will that dynamic continue to be played out? There's only one basketball. There's only one person shooting it, kind of on the offensive possession. How does that continue to develop? Pace of play, which we talked a lot about at the beginning of last season. How does that continue to develop? Or is this going to be a very fast-paced team? Do we have the depth to be a very fast-paced team? If you're going to take a look at our guards, Tyrese and Max, I expect to play 32 to 35 minutes. So is that conducive to wearing them out all, first and second half? Or are we going to need to play kind of a slower pace of play, maybe make sure we're getting a really good shot rather than getting high volume shots up? And then, I guess the last question is some of the younger guys in terms of Weaver and Yema, and as well as, no one touched on him, but Alex and Emekwe, who was freshman last year, didn't play much, extremely athletic. And people have, actually had some nice things to say about him going in the offseason. How does he continue to develop, and maybe how is he a piece in this roster as well? So those are some of the things I'm thinking about. Ultimately, like, all of us can guess and make predictions on what happens, but I think, if you take a look at the season, those are the questions I have for coming up.
And guys, please make sure you like, share, subscribe to the video. Appreciate it, and helps us grow the channel. Talking Texas hoops. Last thing I want to conclude here as we wind down. Last topic is expectations, right? And well, actually, two things: expectations for this season, and then overall, like, do we feel like we're making strides in building this basketball program? And I want everybody to kind of give their final piece before we tie off here. And Ryan, I'll kick it over to you on that one.
Yeah, I'll answer the second question first. I think you have to view last year and even the year before in a vacuum, just because of the situation. And I think you start fresh in terms of building the program. Of course, we hope that RT takes a lot of what has been built in the last couple of years as he grows with this team. But I think we have to take it from ground zero, honestly, and see how he's able to start the season. Are we going to start 11-1 again like we did last year? Beat some, Power 5, top 10 teams back to back like we did. I mean, that was a crazy run. And again, that goes back to the sobering thought of last season and what it was. But I think that's the expectation, is we start from the ground floor in terms and see how this team matures. Like Colin said, how do they gel? Do we have those leaders? We haven't really talked, who's going to replace Timmy Allen, like that type of player too, who we can play through, who's a trusted leader as well. So I think there's still some opportunity to add to this roster, hopefully, with a few other guys still out there to commit. So that could help. In terms of expectations, I think you're sitting right in the middle of the pack of things. Kansas is the clear favorite, I'd imagine, going into it. I'm sure Vegas would agree there with their lineup and what they've been able to do in terms of adding. Then you have some of the other schools who also have recruited really well in the portal. Kansas State has done a good job. Obviously, I think Baylor has lost a few people, but I think they've hit the portal really well and have some younger guys who are going to play. We're going to be right there. I'm not sure with, and I lean Austin on this with Oklahoma State. I know they lost a few really quality players, so I don't know if they're going to be in the mix again. I think West Virginia, they added a couple players as well that could make them good. So I think we're looking at that 2 to 4 range in terms of where we'll be, with Kansas head above shoulders, I think better than everyone else, but that's to be played out on the court. We obviously came out and won the Big 12 tournament after we all said that Kansas was probably the clear, number one to start with going into the Big 12. So who knows? It's a basketball. It's a very fickle sport, as Bill Self has said many times. And I think I'm eager to see what this team brings to the table. And my last thought I'll say, Steve, is we said, is Max going to be able to shoot the ball well? Moody, if history repeats itself, I think everyone who goes into that arena shoots the heck out of the ball all the time. So that bodes well for us, I think, if we're talking about volume shooters and being on our side.
Ryan, you really, I think you've been very clear on this video. You really want to push for Kaluma to close out this. I think you're saying, hey, if I'm on the staff, we got to go all in to try to add that piece. And I don't disagree with you there, honestly, because I think that would help address some questions. But great points, my friend. Austin, jump in.
Yeah, to the second question, I don't have anything to add with what Ryan said. I totally agree from starting from the ground up and just let it ride. I mean, seriously, I have nothing to add. As far as expectations go, this is kind of a question I was wrestling with myself. Are expectations based on the current roster you have or the program that you're talking about? Because, for example, the expectation of Texas baseball every year is Omaha. Like that is just the expectation set by the 39 other teams that have done it before them. Well, the expectation for, Duke basketball is a national championship every single year, set by the other teams. So you ask yourself, well, am I setting this expectation based on what I'm looking at on paper in front of me or the program and the precedent? I think the bare minimum for the University of Texas basketball team should make the NCAA tournament every single year, bar none, regardless of the roster you have. I don't think there's any reason why UT should not put out a top 64 basketball team in the country. I just don't. As far as expectations tangibly with what's in front of me, I'll agree with Ryan. I'm a little more on the optimistic side just because I really like the core nucleus of guys coming back, the veteran leadership because of Brock and Tyrese and Dessou. I would be very surprised if that group, every team goes through a lull in the season and this group will. But I would be very surprised if this group just, folds after a 2 or 3 game losing streak in conference or something like that. So I would say upper middle part of the pack. I would say probably 3rd or 4th in conference. And that may be glass half full. It's also June. Ask me again in November when we do this. But yeah, I really just think the bare minimum expectation at UT should be the NCAA tournament. And anything other than that is a failure. And I think if you don't believe that, then I think you're selling this program short. I really do. So that is kind of my early expectations. And then to conclude, totally agree with Ryan. I think Texas needs to push after one last guy. I'm going to trust the coaching staff's judgment on who that guy is. But I really do think there's 1, maybe 2 more spots to fill to really fulfill this roster and really feel, pretty solid about going into this season. So that's all I got.
I appreciate it, man. And Colin, jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I really like how Austin took a look at that, right? Whether it's Duke basketball, whether it's Texas baseball, Texas football, Georgia football, there's an expectation around school and sport from the history. And then you also have to take a look at what are the current pieces, right? If you took a look at Carolina basketball last year and Carolina basketball historically, you'd be like, wow, national champion. What actually happened was significantly different, right? It's always just fickle generally to kind of look at a basketball season, what happens in the locker room, what happens with a coaching staff, i.e. last year. But when I take a look at just kind of general expectations going forward, my expectation every year is we should be making an NCAA tournament, to Austin's point. We should be a top 64 basketball program every single year. And in my opinion, we should probably be a top 32 basketball program every year. So that should be the top half of really the draw. When I take a look at this roster, I think a lot of things need to come together, but that's the new age of college basketball. How do these guys fit together? How do the coaching staff continue to develop these guys? And then again, we played the toughest basketball league in all of college basketball. It was like that last year. It was like that the year before. Obviously, University of Connecticut won the championship last year, but Baylor and Kansas won 2 years before that. And I expect, Big 12 basketball teams to start beating up on each other every year to be in the conversation for winning a national championship. I've really kind of put us in that 2 to 5 range, and that's how much kind of volatility I think there is in the conference with the transfer portal. When you look at like a TCU, when you take a look at a West Virginia who's getting a few pieces, but notably Kirk Ariza from Arizona, TCU, Jameer Nelson, Ernest Uday from Kansas. Austin's kind of touched on intertransfer portal action. There's another one. So there's going to be a lot of good teams, but if we can kind of stay in that 2 to 5 range, I think that puts us in a very good position to be in that top half of those 64 teams. And then, once it's March, you kind of flip the coin on any given day and any given game. So gives us a good run at it.
We had these new Big 12 teams too, right? Like Houston to the league, right? And so there's some of them aren't up there from a basketball standpoint, but obviously a team like Houston, who was one of the best teams in all of college basketball last year, add some of these teams to the league. Also, it was our last year in the Big 12. So I do think some of that is going to change with us getting to move to the SEC next year. But I appreciate you guys sharing your insights and just, like I said, being honest on where we are as a program right now and what it takes, where those expectations lie. I think Rodney Terry, like I said, yes, he's had to go to plan B, plan C this offseason. And I give him and the coaching staff credit for getting this roster to where it is now, is where, I feel much better than I did a few weeks ago, a few months ago. Totally agree. But I also think there's some humbling aspects that he went through. And so hopefully those are learning things to learn from and opportunities to help us grow and hopefully, like you said, last year we went through adversity in our locker room, the power of love and teamwork. And like, we actually gelled together and like actually went out there and played for one another. And you look at a team like North Carolina, like Colin said, the exact opposite thing happened in their locker room, where it was a complete meltdown and guys hated each other. And so those things, those intangibles that Colin spoke to, definitely something to pay attention to, guys. So like I said before, make sure you like, share, subscribe, whole bit. We're going to have some more basketball talk as things arise and as we get closer to the season and do a real season preview. But overall, we are back at it with our basketball talk. Fellas, thanks for coming on again. And remember, horns always up. Welcome.